And he realizes that these things are not true gods. They shouldn't be worshipped. Why should we worship these things that come and go and temporary? Because if they can go, that means they can let us down. The time we really need them is when they're not there. So why should I worship that? Why should I put my faith in that? Why should I put my trust in that? So one day he's determined. He says to his people, I'm going to show you. I'm going to prove to you that your worship of the idols is false. So when his people have gone, it's their festivity, and it's their religious festival, he doesn't want to participate in it because he doesn't want to be involved in their idol worship at all. So he says to them, I'm sick. He says, I'm sick. Meaning, actually, he was sick of what they're doing. So when they were doing this, he went into the temple and he smashed all the idols except the chief idol. And he took his axe and he hung it round the neck of the chief idol. Now when the people came back, they were outraged. Who has committed this blasphemy? Who has done this to our gods? And some people said, well, you remember that young man Abraham? He was saying that he was going to prove our idols are false. So the king, he brings Abraham in front of the people. He says, Abraham, did you do this to our gods? So Abraham says, ask the big one. Ask him. So then they look at each other and they say to Abraham, Abraham, you know that our gods can't talk to us. He says, why do you worship something that can bring you no benefit and no harm? And this idol can't even protect itself. How is it going to protect you? Isn't that common sense? Isn't that just common sense? Isn't it our common everyday experience? You who are students here in Buckinghamshire and Chiltern University, yeah? When you want to study in a university, now these days you need loans, right? You need money because you have to pay for some of it, right? Okay? Where did you go to get the money? Did you go to the guy begging on the street, sitting outside the railway station? Excuse me, mate, I need to go to university. Could I borrow a couple of £1,000? Did you do that? Did anyone do that? I don't think so. Because if this guy can't help himself, how is he going to help you? When Kuwait was invaded by Iraq, who did they appeal to for help? Bangladesh? Bangladesh with one helicopter? Nothing against Bangladesh, but if you want military aid, Bangladesh had one at the time. I remember reading, they had one helicopter, right? They couldn't cope with the floods in their own country. How would they possibly be able to supply military aid to Kuwait? And nothing against Bangladesh, nothing against the guy begging in the street. It's just common sense. You don't ask someone who can't help themselves, right? Common sense. That's all it is. Common sense. So if the idol cannot do anything for itself, how is it going to be able to do something for you? I mean, isn't it extraordinary? You go to the shop. Excuse me, I'd like that idol over there. Okay, he brings the idol down. And this idol can't, you might think it might fly down itself, right? No, he brings it down. And he pays money for the idol. He actually pays money to get the idol. And then he carries it home. Not the idol doesn't carry him, so that's it, now I'm your God, I'll carry you home. No, he carries the idol home and he puts it up on the shelf, and if it fell down again, he'd have to put it up again. Right? And then he says, oh, such and such, help me. Give me this, give me that. Does that make any sense? Same thing. Muslims do it. A person dies, they wash him, he can't wash himself. They shroud him, he can't shroud himself. They carry him to the grave and they bury him in the grave. And they say, oh, such and such, do this and that for us. Extraordinary. Does this make any sense? And Allah is just appealing to common sense. So this is one broad category. These are false gods. These are things that we should not worship. They cannot give you what you need and what you want. They can't even help themselves. Here is the argument. Whatever things you could say, oh, sometimes my prayers were answered. It's just coincidence. And there are many reasons to explain okay, why amazing things could happen to these idols. But nothing could go against this common sense. Okay, let's look at another category. The other category is the category of the man God. There are many religions throughout history who have believed that some human being is actually God. Now, the example the Quran uses is the example of Christianity. There are Christians who claim that Jesus is Allah. That he is not just the son of Allah, but he is Allah. He is one and part and the same as God. And the Quran appeals to such beautiful, commonsensical things. The Quran says, didn't Jesus and his mother, because some people also worship Mary, and there were some Christians who used to believe also Mary was God. Even Catholics say that Mary is the mother of God. The mother of God? God had a mummy. And so God, mama, mama, right? Changing God's nappy, yeah? Cleaning God's bum when he's done a poo. This is, what's that? Mother of God. Huh? Feeding God. What is this? To say that some human being is equal with God. Didn't he walk on the earth and breathe air and eat food? And they went to the marketplace. You know, they needed to buy things. They went to the marketplace. See how Allah makes things clear. See how people are deluded away from the truth. What is this? Allah asks us in the Quran, if God wanted to destroy Jesus and Mary and everything in the whole earth, who could stop him? Of course, no one. That means that Allah has power over Jesus and Mary. If God has power over them and they are under the authority of God, they can't be the same as God. They can't be. And what does that mean anyway? To say that something is man and God at the same time. It's an impossibility to say that something, by definition, God is infinite, self-sufficient, and eternal. Human beings, by definition, are temporary, mortal, and needy. How can something be eternal and temporary both at the same time? How can something be self-sufficient and needy both at the same time? How can something be eternal and finite both at the same time? It's not a paradox. A paradox means something that seems impossible, but it's not. No, it is an impossibility by definition. Now, there are things that Christians say, God can do anything. Well, I mean, this raises a whole load of questions. God can do anything. I always say, well, do you believe God can do something evil? Either they will say, no, God can't do something evil. Or they'll say, well, he can if he wanted to, but he would never do something evil. I say, why not? They say, because God is good. God only does good things. I say, exactly. It is the nature of God. The nature of God is that God is good. And a good God does not do evil things. It is also the nature of God that God is eternal. So an eternal God doesn't become temporary. It's the nature of God that he is self-sufficient, free of any wants and needs. So God does not become needy. Because that contradicts the nature of God. It's that simple. Doesn't that make sense? Isn't that just common sense? Now, you know, the whole idea that God becomes a man. Okay. You see, the problem is this. If you have a piece of string, yeah, and the piece of string is in the shape of a square, yeah, let's say the square represents the attributes of God. All right? I'm not saying that God is like a square. I'm just saying it represents. So the square, we replace infinite, eternal, self-sufficient, and we just, instead of all of those words, we just have a square. Yeah? And the circle represents the qualities of a human being. Needy, temporary, finite, mortal. You know, we're born, we die, we forget, we need to eat, we need to breathe. So these are our, and let's say all of these, we forget those words and we just use it as a circle. Now, just theoretically, what we could do, perhaps, is we could get the piece of string and change the shape of the piece of string from a square to a circle. So perhaps you could make the square into a circle, and you could make the circle into a square. But what you can't do is make the square into a circle and it's still a square at the same time. Right? Something can't be blue and red and still be blue. You can't make blue red and it's still blue. The circle can't be made a square and still be a circle. But that's what they're trying to say. God became a man but was still God. Doesn't make any sense. It's an impossibility. And wait a minute. These Christians are telling everybody in the world that you're going to go to hell forever if you don't believe something impossible. God is telling us, according to their religion, if we don't believe something absolutely impossible, you'll go to hell forever. So I have to believe something impossible without any proof, because by definition, you can never prove an impossibility. How can you prove something impossible? You can't. So I have to believe something impossible without proof. It's simple. I'll tell you something. And this is what I always say to every Christian. I say, you're telling me that on the day of judgment, I stand in front of God, and God says to me, why didn't you believe that I became a man? I will say, how could I believe that you, Allah, the eternal, self-sufficient creator of the heavens and the earth, was a temporary, mortal, needy man? How could I believe such a thing? You are far above that. If God then puts me in hell forever, I will never feel for one moment of eternity that God has treated me fairly or justly. But if a Christian is asked by God, how could you say that I was equal, that this human being was me? This human being that ate my food, this human being that breathed my air, this human that depended upon me for his entire existence. You're saying that this human being was equal to me? If that person goes to hell forever, they will know that they deserve to be there. They will know it. That's justice. That is justice. There's one other thing I want us to think about. And I like to give this as an example. Right? Modern science has made us appreciate something really remarkable. And that remarkable thing is exactly how minute we are. Actually, 1,400 years ago, the Prophet Muhammad, was also, in reflection of the words of the Quran, reminding us of our humble origins. The Quran reminds us that you came from a sperm drop, a despised fluid. The Quran reminds us of our base origins. The Prophet Muhammad even mentioned that the universe compared to the kursi, وَسِيَ كُرْسِيُهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, and Allah's kursi, his pedestal, extends over the heavens and the earth. How? The Prophet Muhammad said, the universe is like a ring in the desert compared to the kursi. A ring in the desert. Think about that. Think about a ring in the desert. How big is the desert and how small is the ring? And the kursi compared to the arsh, and the arsh means the throne of God, is also like a ring